propose that we go ahead and direct Mr. Commando to start looking at some proposed language to start drafting the ordinance. And he and I were on a telephone conference with Representative Saunders, who is introducing the human rights ordinance under the workforce equality bill that I think Ms. Osborne spoke about at the last meeting, that has been endorsed by a number of the major corporations and business coalition. In fact, the business coalition is formed, and they have signed off on the support for the Senate bill and the House bill. So I would like for us to consider having Mr. Commando go ahead and start looking at some language. There's various templates that's been passed along, I think, to him and his research, to go ahead and draft the ordinance language. Also explore enforcement options. Again, during the telephone conference, there were a couple of other counties that adopted in their ordinance an enforcement that if someone has a complaint, that they just go, they follow it directly to courts. So it kind of bypasses the commission, that they don't have to, but it kind of bypasses the commission as far as from our ordinance that they would have to go through a commission first. Because obviously we don't, I don't think we're in a position to form our own commission to work with the city of Jacksonville. With the Jacksonville Human Rights Commission has its own complications just because of being a local agreement issues, and we have to open that up. The other option was to look at the Florida Commission, the Florida Human Rights Commission, as a possible enforcement agency as an option to add to the ordinance. So I would like to go ahead and, or I'd like, to consider the commission allowing us to go ahead and go forward with that. The other request would be for the commission to adopt a resolution supporting both the House bill and the Senate bill. And
Which bill?
the workforce equality bill. And also ask, the bills have already been assigned committees, and we have some local representatives who sit on the committees, and Representative Saunders asked if we could, either individually or if we want to do something collectively as a commission, write letters or emails or contact the representatives in our district that are on those committees, expressing, our support of that workforce equality bill. So,
How did Representative Saunders, how did he feel the prognosis of the bill, the timing, and would it cover the whole state? Is it something, would it preempt us or any other municipality doing anything?
well, if it does pass, it becomes Florida statute, so it would basically cover the entire state. However, I asked him time frame. I said, do you think this is going to happen this session? And he kind of laughed. He said, probably not. He says, however, it is getting legs in the legislature. There are sides that are now coming together on this. So it's getting support from sides that he had not received support from before. And apparently this bill has been introduced probably several times. And right now this is probably the furthest as far as support that it's garnering. He's not optimistic that anything's going to happen with it in this session. I mean, it would really have to be fast-tracked, and there's still obviously the committee, it's got to go through committee before it even gets to the floor, so it could die in one of the committees. Senate bill, the Senate side, we didn't really talk anything about the Senate side. We could find out some more information about that as far as where that is and the support that it's getting, but the short answer is it's probably not going to pass, or it's probably, if it does, it's a miracle, I would think, if it passes in this session. So, because I asked the same thing, I said, I don't want to spend a lot of our time if we think it's going to, if it could pass now, and he said that it's probably looking at, down the road still on this.
It just bothers me a lot that every major organization looking at this is having trouble passing it, and except for possibly us being very, very interested in
clarify that? I'm sorry, clarify what
Well, the
organizations.
state of Florida, the city of Jacksonville, and both branches of the Florida government have struggled with passing the same language we're looking at, or very close to the same language we're looking at. What is their holdup? What are they, why is it having so much trouble getting through? Why did it not get through in Jacksonville? I haven't been told why, I'm just asking.
Because of the religious groups.
So let's look at that issue for a second. Let's have a very intelligent conversation. You cannot legislate morality, and we have two diabolically opposing ideas of what that is. Why the heck would we be the people to decide that, the five of us? We might have our personal views, but we can't mandate our personal views into a church, and that's what this does.
Well, all this does, Jimmy, is it just expands
Right,
what is already
exactly.
there. And if you read the bill,
It doesn't.
yeah, if you read the bill, if you read the bill, the workforce equality bill, all it does is it expands the classes that are already covered under that bill, and it just expands it to sexual orientation and gender.
expression.
Is it not dragging churches into litigation all over the country?
No.
Wait a second.
No, I mean.
I'm reading
Yes, it is.
articles where it is.
Absolutely.
I'm reading articles where it is, I'm reading
City
articles that are,
attorney, do you have a comment
that
on
are
that?
legitimate cases that are in court. They're real. And I'm not trying to
But
avoid
are you
guilt.
saying that, but do you know what the genesis of those lawsuits are? I
None
mean,
of
what
them
is
have-
the impetus of them? Have you?
I'll send them all
do
to
you know what
you.
they are?
They're
Excuse me, sir.
they're discrimination cases against the church, because the church has a complete opposite view of the individual, and the legislation opened the church up to litigation. That's the way I'm understanding. I could be wrong, and I guess we could, an attorney would
Well,
ask. And that's my concern with it. It's not that I don't agree with the concept. It's that we could potentially open not only our churches, but also our businesses to litigation that we have no enforcement mechanism in our, it's not our task as a body to do this type of work if we can't do the basic enforcement. I think it's just outside of our scope of reach, and that's
Well,
my concern.
there are other municipalities, in fact, Leon County and Volusia County are two of the specific counties that they adopted in their ordinance, that anyone who believes that they have a complaint of discrimination can just file it in the civil courts. And that's all it is. And everybody has that right. Anyway, I mean, they would have that right, but
But did they not create the law that allows that to happen? In other words, they're not the key.
they adopted their own human rights ordinance that prohibited discrimination
So they
against.
open the churches and the businesses up to the litigation by doing so. There's a cake shop that I read about, has nothing to do with any of the information here. It was on television, on NBC or one of the news channels, where there's a cake shop that wouldn't make a cake for a gay person based on their religious beliefs. And their religious beliefs are not for us to get into, I don't believe. And they definitely discriminated against the individual because of their sexual orientation. It was all clear that they laid it out, but it was two issues that were, and it's not, I'm not comfortable taking a side in that. It's not, I don't believe it's a good idea for us to take a side in that issue. I think our
Well, if we don't
society
take,
as a
if we
whole
don't
should
take a
do that.
side, if we don't take a stand against this, then we would never have civil rights. We would not have women's
understand
right to vote.
I
We
understand that
wouldn't have,
reality,
I mean,
but
we wouldn't have any of
I
the
agree with-
anti-discrimination laws if we didn't take a
I
stand on
agree
it.
with you, but I think it crosses one line. And this is interesting for me to be arguing this.
All of that crosses those lines. If you heard the same arguments in the sixties, in the seventies, in the fifties, in the twenties, those were all the same type of arguments that were given. That these people were not, they did not deserve it, this was not a protected class, we were
I
opening
agree,
up all
this is
this. I
good,
mean,
this is fantastic to have this discussion, but this is where I kind of have the heartburn with it. The language that one side uses to form their argument is old language, and it's
which side is
verbatim,
that?
the Christian side of the thing. And it's funny for me to be arguing this, if you had any idea. But the Christian side of it had their opinion formed, and their morals were formed around this language from written word, and some of it's could be translated different ways, and there's different ways to do it, but it's their moral beliefs. It's at the core of their existence. It just is odd for this board to be in a position to be trying to put that group, a large group of people, directly in opposition to their core beliefs.
Well,
It just
then-
strikes at the
Amen.
core of the most fundamental function. It is definitely society's role to wrestle with this issue. It's just odd that Atlantic Beach, 12,000 citizens, were gonna spearhead in this part of the state and the country, this monumental social shift that could, definitely be the norm. And I know it has to start somewhere, and I
Well,
understand.
it's already started, Jimmy. We're not the first in the state to pass an ordinance like this. 179 other municipalities and cities within the state of Florida have already passed this. Okay, we're kind of behind the 8 ball.
Out of
And-
400.
And and look at it this way, if you didn't have the people who were really fighting for equality, for justice and equality, again, we would still have bathrooms for black people and bathrooms for white people. The women would not be voting. But that was the same, but those were the same kind of, it was all fear. It was all these arguments were based on fear in order to try and keep the rights to be equal among everyone.
I
And it's
understand.
the same argument that's being hashed up with just this particular groups of people to just expand a law that we already have. And it's a misnomer when people say, well, aren't they already covered under the federal law? No, they're not. If they were covered under federal law, we wouldn't have this discussion.
And I agree, and I actually see the shift taking place, and I have no thought on that. This society shifts that way. My issue is that I was elected by these citizens here, right here.
Okay.
And I've heard from many of them, and they agree with the ordinance, and I listen carefully, and I take that into account. But the larger percentage would probably side with not spearheading this, not taking the risk of being